You're listening to the We Are Libertarians podcast network. Find all of our shows at wearelibertarians.com.
Hey, it's Haley Steinfeld. When everything requires your attention, it can be tough to figure out what to prioritize. But I'm here to talk to you about something that you should always put first, your breast health. In fact, if you're 40 and over, you should be getting screened once a year. And if you're under 40, it's never too soon to visit yourattentionplease.com to learn about your breast cancer risk. So go on, pay the girls some attention and take the time to find out your breast cancer risk at yourattentionplease.com. Trust me, your future self will thank you.
Welcome to the Chris Spangle Show. Thanks so much for joining me. This is a very special episode, so I'll explain why if you become a patron, but I've started doing a daily Patreon show. I just think there's so much to say, so much going on, and I'm really rusty, so I want to work it out behind the paywall with my friends. I've not really ever done a monologue show, and I want to try it and work it out, but I thought this was a really fun, insightful episode, if I do say so myself, and I wanted to give you a taste of what you're going to get if you join the Patreon or the private Substack. I'll put the links in the show notes if you want to come join. And so we took a look at what the Republicans said about themselves and the country and the future through the speech of Vivek Ramaswamy yesterday over there on Patreon, and then today is Michelle Obama. So we're going to pick these two speeches apart, and what did they think it means to be an American? And this is Michelle Obama's view, and I try to pull apart some of the subtext. Thought it was a really strong speech. Thought Vivek's speech yesterday was strong for the Republican convention speeches. Not a huge Vivek fan, but he articulates the case really well for what Republicans believe and where they ought to go, as opposed to the thing about Vivek, why I think he's popular and why he's effective, is that he doesn't wallow in self-pity like Trump. He doesn't just attack the left. He says, look, here's what our values are and here's where our vision ought to go. So we picked that apart yesterday, and then today's Michelle. So stay tuned. Thanks so much for listening. Please join up on the Patreon. It helps support the We Are Libertarians podcast network, the Chris Spangle Show, and my family. And so I appreciate all that and love for you to get over there, get into the community, leave some comments, and hopefully we can learn from each other. All right, so here, without further ado, is our episode on the DNC. So we're going to talk a little bit about Michelle Obama, and we're going to play her speech and pick it apart in the same way we did with Vivek yesterday. Like I said yesterday, I feel like Michelle Obama and Vivek Ramaswamy are the, I hate to say spiritual centers of their party, but that sort of is the phrase that maybe gets closest at what I'm going for here. There is a lot of, I, after watching this speech, thought, if Michelle Obama were running, the Democrats would win 50 states. And I feel that way after watching Kamala Harris speak last night. She did a fine job of articulating who she was, what she believes in, and her points. But I don't know that I remember. I listened to it this morning. It's noon when I'm recording this, and I listened to it at 6 a.m. So 6 hours later, I can't tell you a line from it. I remember parts of Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, and Michelle Obama's speeches, but I don't think there was anything in Kamala Harris's speech that stood out last night that was particularly gripping. But I'm going to give her a break because here's the thing about Kamala. I don't know why people are talking about her as a once-in-a-generation politician. It's like when people say Joe Biden is the most consequential president of our lifetime and he should be on Mount Rushmore. If that were the case, then why isn't Joe Biden at the convention? Why did Michelle Obama not mention him? Why wasn't he there at the balloon drop last night? He's not popular. He is not consequential in the way that they like to overblow it. And I feel like they're doing that with Kamala. They're trying to sell her and say, this is exciting, and everybody get amped up and go out and fight. But the reality is she's just a sort of average politician. Now, I think there is some familiarity there that people are attracted to. It's, look, I can't take Trump because he's just so over the top and he's a choice for something different. I'm just going to stick with the politician I know. Yeah, she says she's for me, but I know she's for the rich people. But at least I won't have to think about her. This is a lot of why Joe Biden won in 2020. People weren't going to have to think about Joe Biden all the time. And for that first year or two, you really didn't. It wasn't until 2020 or 2024 that everybody started talking about Joe Biden again. You had the opportunity to ignore the presidency for a while. And that was really nice. So I think there's something comforting in Kamala Harris in that she's full of it. She's not going to deliver on everything she's promising. She's saying she's for freedom, but she's going to do a lot of anti-freedom stuff. But at least she's not going to fundamentally transform America and our politics and all that. And I'm just worn out with... So I feel like the calculation that most independents are going to make is that they're okay with someone who's a little bit of a journeyman quarterback. And I definitely think that she is that. I think she's qualified to be president. I don't know that she knows what she believes. It does seem like there's a lot of flip-flopping going on. So it'd be great to actually have her sit down and do an interview and have someone ask, what do you believe about this? What do you believe about that? So far, it seems like we're getting John McCain's foreign policy mixed with Bernie Sanders' economic policy. Not a fan of that. But I think the speech that kind of best articulates what I see in my friends that are Democrats was Michelle Obama's. This was 3 days ago now? Yeah, August 20th. So this is the 23rd. Obviously, the wife of Barack Obama, former first lady, extremely popular. If you're looking at who was going to replace Joe Biden, it was Michelle Obama by 30 points over Kamala. So very popular and great speech in a lot of ways. I think there are some things that I thought were that I liked and some things I didn't like. So we're just going to jump into it. Let's start with Michelle Obama speaking at the 2024 National Democratic Convention. You know what would be smart? If I sat down to do this show and I actually plugged in all of my cords. Classic wall, right? Classic wall. It's amazing that I have made it this far, having been this stupid. In my brain, when I prepare for the show and I start to get ready, it's just like this. So I think it's... No, it's not working. And I mean me. Barely working here. All right, I think we're good now. There we go. All right, finally.
Something wonderfully magical is in the air, isn't it? We're feeling it here in this arena, but it's spreading all across this country we love. A familiar feeling that's been buried too deep for far too long. You know what I'm talking about. It's the contagious power of hope.
Now, let me say that this was, I think, a really important thing to understand. Now, what I've read, I'm not a Democrat. I come from the Republican Party, spent many years in the Libertarian Party, still consider myself a small L libertarian. I wish my Libertarian Party friends the best. I just don't find that to be like a thing I'm into anymore. Definitely could never be a Democrat. But I am curious about the Democrats after this convention, because when you live in the right-wing bubbles, you are taught a certain way of thinking about Democrats, and the Democrats definitely do this to Republicans too. They assign to them a character. They assign to them thinking patterns, right? So Republicans, according to Democrats, are all just unfeeling, heartless, capitalist bastards who don't give a fig about poor people, right? And Trump has changed how Democrats were viewed. Democrats were all viewed as welfare queens, to use an offensive term. And now they're seen as garchic, masters of the economy, right? So the view has shifted. But if you try to understand what a party thinks about itself, I think that's more helpful than trying to understand what your side thinks about the other party. The Democrats, for many years, have felt a lack of enthusiasm. When you had Hillary Clinton running, why did Hillary Clinton lose? It was a lack of voter turnout from Democrats. They turned out for Joe Biden because they were against Donald Trump. For a decade, the motivating animus of the Democratic Party has been against Donald Trump. When it was Barack Obama who was at the top of the ticket, the motivating animus was hope and change. It was about being excited to be a Democrat. And this moment of Joe Biden stepping down and Kamala Harris stepping up has given them the opportunity to feel good about being Democrats again because they're not slouching towards another potential loss or a Pyrrhic victory with Joe Biden. They feel like they're about to win and they're going to dominate. So Michelle Obama here is hitting on the fact that it feels good to be a Democrat again. Now, I don't think she means because the Barack Obama campaign is in charge. I think she means it's because she's reflecting what people actually feel. After night one, Bill Clinton tore up his speech and rewrote his speech to match the enthusiastic tone of this convention. And I think this is really important to understand. When Joe Biden was at the top of the ticket, he had the ineffective message of democracy is going to end. If Donald Trump wins, democracy will be over. You won't even have any democracy anywhere, which is nonsense, right? I always like to point to Russia. After the fall of the Soviet Union, the Western countries move in and help set up democratic reforms under Boris Yeltsin over a period of 8 years. Boris Yeltsin, obviously a very corrupt man, the West looked past the corruption of Boris Yeltsin because they were setting up democracy. Then, democratically elected, comes Vladimir Putin. And it takes him 20 years to tear down 8 years of democratic reforms. So the argument that Donald Trump in another 4 years could destroy our democracy of 250 years, I always found to fall a little flat. Secondly, I'm not saying there isn't a lot of credence to what Joe Biden was arguing, which was that Donald Trump is a fundamental change in our view of democracy towards a more autocratic style of government like Viktor Orban. I don't think even the right can argue that at this point. The world respected us. Kim Jong-un liked us. Vladimir Putin liked us. Viktor Orban liked us. Okay. Anybody that we want to like us, did they like us? It's a silly argument, but there's not a lot of, it's like a fear-based message that wasn't really connecting with the American people, which is why Joe Biden was losing. And Kamala Harris, I think, has done something extraordinary in that she has come in and she has picked off the best parts of some of the most successful campaigns of the last 40 years. She's focusing on freedom like Ronald Reagan did. Look, we want freedom. And in that, she's doing the triangulation of Bill Clinton, where Bill Clinton came in as a Democrat and adopted some Republican policies and made the Republicans melt down a little bit because they couldn't argue with the Democratic president, and you got things like welfare to work. I don't know that Kamala Harris is going to come in and do triangulation policy-wise, but in terms of messaging, you see her trying to adopt a lot of Republican messages from the last 15 years and adopt them to her own. And then you have the hope and changiness of Barack Obama's campaign. We're going to move forward. Anything is possible when we work together. And then you also have the historic identity piece of Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama's campaign in the fact that she's a woman and a woman of color. So they have learned, her campaign team, and she, I imagine, is behind it because the principal is the one that sets the tone, but she has brought in a lot of Barack Obama's team. Matthew Continetti has an article in, I don't think it's the Federalist, I think maybe the Washington Times, they run together, but he talks a lot in this article about how she has brought on the Obama team. And the Democrats are an interesting group because the Republicans, it's all Trump now. There's no Bush Republicans left. There's no Mitch Daniels Republicans. You're a Trump Republican or you're out. But the Democrats still have, although fading, the Clinton Republicans in their team from the 90s, Carville, Begala, George Stephanopoulos, or as Trump hilariously called him, Stompanopoulos or something. And then you have the Obama teams, and now you have the Biden teams, and then you also have the Squad and a lot of smaller disparate groups because it's a coalition party. But you have several different power bases, and Kamala Harris, because if she had just run for the nomination a year ago, she would have to build her own team or try to adopt some of the players from Biden's team or Obama's team or Clinton's team or whatever. But because it's all hands on deck within 100 days, she's accessing people from each one of those three periods of the Democratic Party, which I think is leading to a very successful messaging for them. I know we were talking about Michelle Obama, weren't we? I should get back to it, but I think it's fascinating to see how they have tried to steal Republican messaging and adopt it to their campaign. So, yeah, Democrats are excited. All right, we're only a minute into this, so I'm going to try and not talk too much.
The anticipation, the energy, the exhilaration of once again being on the cusp of a brighter day. The chance to vanquish the demons of fear, division, and hate that have consumed us and continue pursuing the unfinished promise of this great nation, the dream that our parents and grandparents fought and died and sacrificed for. America, hope is making a comeback.
Now, let's all just forget that Democrats are in the White House, by the way. That's is shade? Is she throwing shade on him? I don't know. But clearly things are not well between... Because, look, Barack Obama comes out in his speech and says great things about Joe Biden, and we're friends. Probably not true on the Biden side towards Barack Obama, considering he screwed him twice out of the presidency. But you know how it is when... The wife tells the truth. When you don't really like your high school friend and you're in your 40s, but your buddies, I don't know, man, maybe we're not friends. Look at the wife. She knows how he thinks, and she can't hide it.
But to be honest, I am realizing that until recently, I have mourned the dimming of that hope. And maybe you've experienced the same feelings. Is that deep pit in my stomach, a palpable sense of dread about the future?
Now, I didn't go back and check this, but apparently she's used this template for a speech in all three of her speeches, or the last three speeches, and that line specifically, which I thought was interesting. I do that too. If I have to give the speech every year, I'm just going to repeat.
And for me, that mourning has also been mixed with my own personal grief. The last time I was here in my hometown was to memorialize my mother, the woman who showed me the meaning of hard work and humility and decency, the woman who set my moral compass high and showed me the power of my own voice. Folks, I still feel her loss so profoundly. I wasn't even sure if I'd be steady enough to stand before you tonight, but my heart compelled me to be here because of the sense of duty that I feel to honor her memory and to remind us all not to squander the sacrifices our elders made to give us a better future.
Now, this is one thing I think that the Democrats did well this week, which was channel their own personal experiences, talk about sacrifice, and put them in very personal terms about how much... There's a lot of Flight 93 election going on here. Both parties are doing it this election cycle. This is the most important election cycle in history, and if we don't win, the country is going to end. If Kamala Harris doesn't win this election, all of the work of our ancestors will disappear. Again, not true. The crowd, how much it spoke to them. It's a great motivating line.
My mom, in her steady, quiet way, lived out that striving sense of hope every single day of her life. She believed that all children, all people have value, that anyone can succeed if given the opportunity. She and my father didn't aspire to be wealthy. In fact, they were suspicious of folks who took more than they needed. They understood that it wasn't enough for their kids to thrive if everyone else around us was drowning. So my mother volunteered at the local school. She always looked out for the other kids on the block. She was glad to do the thankless, unglamorous work that for generations has strengthened the fabric of this nation. The belief that if you do unto others, if you love thy neighbor, if you work and scrape and sacrifice, it will pay off. If not for you, then maybe for your children or your grandchildren. Those values have been passed on through family farms and factory towns, through tree-lined streets and crowded tenements, through prayer groups and National Guard units and social studies classrooms. Those were the values my mother poured into me until her very last breath. Kamala Harris and I built our lives on those same foundational values. Even though our mothers grew up an ocean apart, they shared the same belief in the promise of this country.
I loved this part. I agree with this part, okay? And I think this is what so many Republicans miss about pluralism, is that this country isn't based around identity, okay? And I know that sounds weird, but a lot of Christian nationalists are basing their view of what makes America great based on white identity and Christian identity. And as a pluralist, as a Christian who believes that many cultures can contribute to the greatness of the country, that we are not formed around a geographical location necessarily, but ideas. And those ideas are open to anyone that moves here and wants to accept those ideas and participate in those ideas. That was a great part. Kamala Harris's mom can grow up in India and still be an American because she appreciates what it means to be an American. And one interesting thing about what it means to be an American, according to many of the speakers in this convention and what we heard from Vivek Ramaswamy yesterday, is that hard work is at the center of that. That merit and achievement is at the center of what it means to be an American. And I thought that was an interesting parallel between the two of them. They're equating the American dream, both at the RNC and DNC conventions, with whether or not you achieve success in America because you worked hard. And also, you really should start from humble beginnings, okay? We're going to hear her talk about affirmative action. This is a very wealthy woman standing on stage. I'm not saying she didn't come from humble circumstances, but it's great that she started from humble circumstances and worked herself into wealth and power. But that seems to be the predominant value at both of these conventions of what it means to be a great American. Starting from poor circumstances and working yourself into money and power. And I think as Americans, we need to step back and go, is this what it means to be an American? Is this what we value? Is this what we want our culture overall and what it means to be an American? Maybe it always has. Maybe it's a very telling sign that's what's actually important when it comes to being an American.
That's why her mother moved here from India at 19. It's why she taught Kamala about justice, about the obligation to lift others up, about our responsibility to give more than we take. She'd often tell her daughter, don't sit around and complain about things, do something. So,
again, I totally agree with her. We just have different views on this. I don't find using government as a means to change things as a moral good. She does. Michelle Obama, Kamala Harris view do something. And this is the problem with American society looking at politics and government as the main agent of change. And some people look at the main agent of change as business. And my philosophy is that we have to look at the true fundamental driver of change, which is civil society. This is a three-legged stool in terms of American success. You have to have a government that is limited, yet strong enough to mediate between parties that are violating other people's rights, like murder, fraud, theft, etc. A free market system of business that gives people jobs and economic opportunity and creates wealth all across from the bottom to the top. And then the third is strong individuals, strong families, and strong nonprofit organizations, strong churches, strong community groups. And that actually is where culture is born. That's where culture operates and functions. And what comes out of civil society from strong individuals, from strong families, from strong community groups, actually inform what happens in the marketplace and what happens in government. Government is often a lagging indicator, and so are markets. It comes out of what individuals need. And people going out and helping their neighbors and connecting with their neighbors and creating community groups to address issues that then lead to new products to solve those problems or government intervening in some way. And so I think it's a huge fundamental problem for our society that so many of us look towards government as the thing that needs to initiate that change and initiate moral change in society, that it is the arbiter of good and evil. You are not a good person if you don't agree with my politics. That's a fundamentally unhealthy sign of our politics. Doing something can be done privately. It doesn't mean being politically active. Now, I may be unfairly reading into what she is intimating, but we're watching a presidential political convention, so I'm just guessing that she probably thinks of government first. But she did come from a community organizing background, which I think is really important and falls under that third stool.
With that voice in her head, Kamala went out and she worked hard in school, graduating from an HBCU, earning her law degree at a state school. And then she went on to work for the people, fighting to hold lawbreakers accountable, strengthening the rule of law, fighting to get folks better wages, cheaper prescription drugs, a good education, decent health care, child care, elder care. From a middle-class household, Kamala worked her way up to become Vice President of the United States of America. My girl, Kamala Harris, is more than ready for this moment. She is one of the most qualified people ever to seek the office of the presidency. And she is one of the most dignified. A tribute to her mother, to my mother, and to your mother too. The embodiment of the stories we tell ourselves about this country. Her story is your story. It's my story. It's the story of the vast majority of Americans trying to build a better life. Look, Kamala knows, like we do, that regardless of where you come from, what you look like, who you love, how you worship, or what's in your bank account, we all deserve the opportunity to build a decent life. All of our contributions deserve to be accepted and valued.
I definitely think she's talking about Republicans and MAGA conservatives there.
Because no one has a monopoly on what it means to be an American. No one. Kamala has shown her allegiance to this nation, not by spewing anger and bitterness, but by living a life of service and always pushing the doors of opportunity open to others. She understands that most of us will never be afforded the grace of failing forward.
Now that is shade at Donald Trump, who has failed forward. I don't know that I buy that Donald Trump has failed forward. Right? I think if you were to go back in the history of America, name an American who has had a crazier life than Donald Trump. Is he a failure? I think he's an incompetent person, but he's also a billion. He did build, he had a small loan of $1 million from his dad or whatever it was, but he did build a lot of wealth. And I think that's what attracts a lot of people to Donald Trump. Like, I remember in the 80s, 90s, my dad had the Art of the Deal, and that was like the American dream when I was a kid, was to become Donald Trump. And I think that's part of so much of the backlash now, especially in younger generations. Oh, we're told this is a guy to idealize, and then you turn out he's just a total fraud and a scumbag. So I don't know. It's hard to say he's a failure. He was president, and he did some good things. But let's not labor on that. I think what she was talking about before was the question of patriotism. What does it mean to be a patriot? And I think this is an interesting question that she's implicitly posing in this election and trying to frame. Does it mean that you buy Lee Greenwood's Bible and play his song, God Bless the USA, all the time, and you love America as almost a caricature, or are you devoted to serving the country? Now, what you have to remember about Kamala Harris is that she has never had a job outside of government that I know of, other than this McDonald's. She has been a prosecutor, a senator. She's qualified to be president because she's spent so much time working at different levels of government. So she will be managing government bureaucracy and has a career working in it. And obviously is vice president. But again, that's their notion of service. That gaining political power equals service. Ron DeSantis, I'm sure, isn't thought of as a person who is serving his state just because he holds But I do think that's a question of what does it mean to be a patriot that I'd ask you to think about. Comment on Patreon or on Substack. Is it this sort of cotton candy version of patriotism of let's just wave the flag and buy into whatever the government says, or it's a cultural thing because Hulk Hogan rips his shirt off? Or is patriotism working for the government, collecting a paycheck, working for a political campaign? Or is it something higher than that? I think, to me, patriotism is when you love your country, you identify, understand, and love the values, the higher values of a nation, and work to try to achieve those values. I definitely think hard work is an American value. Pluralism is an American value, which is why I split with so many libertarians and Republicans on immigration. I wouldn't say I'm open borders, but I definitely don't want to shut the border down. We should give as many people economic opportunity as possible. And when we talk about the birth rate declining, the best way to fix that is to grow the labor force by letting people in who have skills from other countries. Limited government is an American value. Federalism, where you have a federal government, state government, local government, these are American values, which a lot of Democrats and Republicans attack now. They want to centralize and grow the power of the president. So what is patriotism? Think about it. Leave a comment. Love to hear what you think. But that's an interesting contrast between sort of a fake, failing forward, this is her view, of Donald Trump and Kamala Harris's version of patriotism. And this, I think, is an important thing that the Harris campaign and the DNC tried to use this week and are trying in their campaign to reset the idea that for so long they let the Republicans define them rightly or wrongly, depending on your view, that the Democratic Party is a coastal elitist party that is out of touch with America and is actually the heart and soul of America. That Donald Trump doesn't just speak for the blue-collar workers. We have something to say about it, too. It's not just the Republicans that are patriotic. Democrats are patriotic, too, which goes back to kind of Bush pushing that it's unpatriotic to be on the left. So they're really trying to reset of we're a party of masculinity, too. We're a party of patriotism. We're a party of freedom, too. And we're not going to let you take those terms and define us certain ways anymore. And that's what a lot of this convention has been about, is saying, no, we're not going to let these ideas of what it means. Donald Trump's shaping of Democrats for so long, I think, worked, and why Joe Biden couldn't overcome a lot of those things because of his skill is why it has been embedded in the minds of people.
We will never benefit from the affirmative action of generational wealth.
All right, now this was the big line, the affirmative action of generational wealth. I wonder what Sasha and Malia think about that line. We're going to give that all to the government when the Obamas die, and we're going to pass that on to the next generation. Because the American dream is that you build wealth and pass it on to generations, right? But the particular issue with this, and this is obviously a racially coded statement, but, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I think the subtext here is she is saying what a lot of black people think, according to my friends, Miss Pat and others. And what I see is, look, we weren't given a fair chance until the 80s and even maybe till today to economically participate in the full spectrum of the American economy. And blacks couldn't own houses. And if they did, it was in districts where nobody wanted to buy a house. So people who had great-grandparents buying farms and houses 20 years ago couldn't pass that wealth on. And so that's what she's talking about there. But you can hear the crowd. It was a very popular line.
Never be afforded the grace of failing forward. We will always push it.
This is something that Pat has taught me too. A lot of this is if you are a black woman, if you are a woman, if you are a person of color, you have to work harder to achieve your position than other people. And so she is venting that frustration in this section of the speech.
The doors of opportunity open to others. She understands that most of us will never be afforded the grace of failing forward. We will never benefit from the affirmative action of generational wealth. If we bankrupt a business or choke in a crisis, we don't get a second, third, or fourth chance. If things don't go our way, we don't have the luxury of whining or cheating others to get further ahead. No. We don't get to change the rules so we always win. If we see a mountain in front of us, we don't expect there to be an escalator waiting to take us to the top. No. We put our heads down get to work in America, we do something. And throughout her entire life, that's what we've seen from Kamala Harris. The steel of her spine, the steadiness of her upbringing, the honesty of her example, and yes, the joy of her laughter and her light. It couldn't be more obvious. Of the two major candidates in this race, only Kamala Harris truly understands the unseen labor and unwavering commitment that has always made America great.
Really good, really strong passage in terms of trying to advance her argument. And she keeps saying we, right? And I told you the subtext there is that I think a lot of this convention, what I liked about this convention is that they focused on Donald Trump. Not white America, not Republicans, not even Republican Congress, but Donald Trump. Every negative was put on the man, right? So I think you, as a Republican, independent, libertarian, could watch this convention and didn't feel like that little tug of, am I being attacked here? Right? That was the only time where I felt like, oh, is she talking about white people or just Donald Trump here? The answer is yes, probably. But the idea that white America or Republican white America has had it easy, I think is always going to make suburban people bristle, right? Even if historically that is true in terms of position from which you're starting. But that was the only time in this convention that I felt like, how do I put this? When we heard Vivek talk yesterday about at the Republican convention, all Democrats talk about is woke. All Democrats talk about is equity, diversity, inclusion, blah, 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 blah. I didn't hear any of that this week. That right there was the closest that it came, and she's right. And it was interesting and thought-provoking, right? So this idea that white people are being preyed upon by Democrats just didn't really hold up if you were watching this convention, because if you listened to that, you were like, oh, what does she mean? I think that kind of went over a lot of suburban people's heads, but I think it was an important line and obviously the most memorable. But what does it mean to be an American? That's the question we're asking about these two speeches. It does mean equal opportunity for all, equal access to the marketplace, equal access to buy a house. That's like just being a good person, right? So ensuring that everybody can get into the marketplace, not based on the color of their skin, but just because they're human beings, is the core of it.
Now, unfortunately, we know what comes next. We know folks are going to do everything they can to distort her truth. My husband and I sadly know a little something about this. For years, Donald Trump did everything in his power to try to make people fear us. See, his limited, narrow view of the world made him feel threatened by the existence of two hardworking, highly educated, successful people who happen to be black.
I mean, I'm going to be honest, there's a special way that Donald Trump talks about black people. Like he just like shrugs at Joe Biden and he's irrelevant. But he has a special dislike for people of color in the way that he talks about them. I think you really have to watch him, and he just makes fun of everybody. The energy is just different.
Who's going to tell him that the job he's currently seeking might just be one of those black jobs?
Like, his entire point about black jobs is that these are low-wage jobs, right? That's where his mentality is. That's where they belong. But that was one of the most memorable lines, and you can't see the video, but the video, they're just going crazy. There's a guy in the crowd who's like literally going, he's got his hands on his head. I'm playing the PBS NewsHour version of this, 11 minutes, 49 seconds in. And he's going, oh my God. Oh, what the rap battle meme.
Ugly, misogynistic, racist lies as a substitute for real ideas and solutions that will actually make people's lives better. Look, because cutting our health care, taking away our freedom to control our bodies, the
vaccines,
freedom to become a mother through IVF like I did, those things are not going to improve the health outcomes of our wives, mothers, and daughters. Shutting down the Department of Education, banning our books, none of that will prepare our kids for the future. Demonizing our children for being who they are and loving who they love, look, that doesn't make anybody's life better. Instead, it only makes us small. And let me tell you this, going small is never the answer. Going small is the opposite of what we teach our kids. Going small is petty, it's unhealthy, and quite frankly, it's unpresidential.
I think she nailed why I don't like Donald Trump is that he's just an emotionally backward person. And you see the Theo Von interview that we talked about the other day, and it's like the first time you ever really feel like he's a person. And if that guy were showing up more, then I think he'd be further ahead. The guy that calls people who, I read a story Allie Beth Stuckey put out today on her Instagram, guy donated twice to his campaign, and then he called him when he found out his wife was sick, and then when she died, he sent him condolences. Right? There's a lot of stories about Donald Trump, like that personal touch that he calls people, he talks to people, but you just don't feel that in his politics. And that, I think, is the big difference between what the Democrats did this week and what the Republicans weren't able to do, except for Donald Jr.'s daughter. People who are who are on the fringes of politics, people who are invested in politics, they care about policy. People who are on the fringes, who are just showing up to vote every 4 years, not every 2 or every 3, or every 1, they care that the people they're voting for care about them, right? And they want to vote for the people who seem the most empathetic usually. Sorry, that's just how people look at it. Whether you think that's right or wrong, that's how the electorate tends to look at it. So I think Republicans have done a very poor job of, like I said yesterday, there's 2 ways to look at any policy or approaches: the moral view and the utilitarian view. And people on the right, we tend to focus on what doesn't work instead of what's moral. And Democrats tend to look at, this is an injustice, let's fix it, and then craft a policy that doesn't work and get credit for trying and failing and causing things, the trade-offs to be totally upside down. And then Republicans get mad because they never get called on it, but nobody listens to them because they don't feel like they actually care about them. They did an effective job this week of pretending that Kamala Harris cares about regular people.
So, why would any of us accept this from anyone seeking our highest office? Why would we normalize that type of backward leadership? Doing so only demeans and cheapens our politics. It only serves to further discourage good, big-hearted people from wanting to get involved at all. America, our parents taught us better than that, and we deserve so much better than that. That's why we must do everything in our power to elect 2 of those good, big-hearted people. There is no other choice than Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. No other choice.
It just drives me crazy, this idea that because you're involved in politics, you're a good person. Like, that politics is a moral force for good. This is something about the Obama era that it always drove me nuts, because it's not focusing in on what government actually is. Government is monopolized violence, and it is two sides fighting for the gun to point at the other's head right now. It is not inherently good. It is inherently selfish and corrupt. Government, by and large, is made up of the people, but the people have let go of the leash, and the dog is angry, ready to bite somebody. It's not. You cannot vote yourself into a more moral society. It just doesn't work like that.
As we embrace this renewed sense of hope, let us not forget the despair we have felt. Let us not forget what we are up against. Yes, Kamala and Tim are doing great now. We're loving it. They're packing arenas across the country. Folks are energized. We are feeling good. But remember, there are still so many people who are desperate for a different outcome, who are ready to question and criticize every move Kamala makes, who are eager to spread those lies, who don't want to vote for a woman, who will continue to prioritize building their wealth over ensuring that everyone has enough. So no matter how good we feel tonight or tomorrow or the next day, this is going to be an uphill battle. So folks, we cannot be our own worst enemies. No. See, because the minute something goes wrong, the minute a lie takes hold, folks, we cannot start wringing our hands. We cannot get a Goldilocks complex about whether everything is just right. And we cannot indulge our anxieties about whether this country will elect someone like Kamala instead of doing everything we can to get someone like Kamala elected.
Now, this is an important subtext that you may miss if you are a white suburbanite Republican leaning person like me, okay? The idea that the pat-down has given me access to I watch a lot of Instagram accounts, have a lot of conversations, watch a lot of conversations in the black community now. And there's a little bit of complacency saying, what's the point of trying? Because white America will never vote for a black woman. This happened a lot during Obama. And you got Barack Obama twice, right? So I feel like it's a little bit of fatalism that sets in that is, I just think, in error at this point. But it's like a bad thinking error, right? Like a catastrophization that it's not going to work because of X, Y, and Z. She's saying that just because you see someone saying something that you don't like, or the polls start to go down, it's not feeding into that idea that America's not ready for change. They're not ready, so let's just give up and stay home. Hillary Clinton lost because Democrats, specifically black women, stayed home. And so the most effective messenger to that target audience is saying, cut it out, get to work, and drive out the base.
And Tim, they have lived amazing lives. And I am confident that they will lead with compassion, inclusion, and grace. But they are still only human. They are not perfect. And like all of us, they will make mistakes. But luckily, y'all, this is not just on them. No, this is up to us.
Now, maybe I just don't know enough about Democratic culture to get this piece right, that Maybe there's a trait in Democrats that when they throw their hands up too easily, because Republicans show up to the polls, libertarians go to the polls, right? Maybe Democrats are just, this is where I need to find more Democrat friends to explain the culture to me, because when Liz Warren walked out the other night and got this huge standing ovation, I was like, what? People like Elizabeth Warren? But this I thought was interesting in that if there's problems, because there will be problems, because they're not perfect, there's going to be gaffes, show up, do the work. Maybe that's a Kamala thing. Maybe she knows she's weak in these interviews, and there's going to be periods of this campaign, because there are in every campaign. 2016, August, early September, everybody was like, Trump's done. This isn't going to work. And then he had a monster October. You cannot count it out. And she's also stealing the spines of Democrats, saying, look, Republicans make a lot of stuff up. All right, let's continue.
All of us to be the solution that we seek. It's up to all of us to be the antidote to the darkness and division. Look, I don't care how you identify politically, whether you're Democrat, Republican, Independent, or none of the above. This is our time to stand up for what we know in our hearts is right. To stand up, not just for our basic freedoms, but for decency and humanity, for basic respect, dignity, and empathy, for the values at the very foundation of this democracy. It's up to us to remember what Kamala's mother told her. Don't just sit around and complain. Do something. If they lie about her, and they will, we've got to do something. If we see a bad poll, and we will, we got to put down that phone and do something. If we start feeling tired, if we start feeling that dread creeping back in, we got to pick ourselves up, throw water on our face, and what? We only have 2.5 months, y'all, to get this done. Only 11 weeks to make sure every single person we know is registered and has a voting plan. So we cannot afford for anyone in America to sit on their hands and wait to be called. Don't complain if no one from the campaign has specifically reached out to you to ask you for your support.
No, okay.
There is simply...
Hold on. This is funny because this made me laugh, because there's a thing in the Libertarian Party where people will not support a candidate unless the candidate personally calls them. A county chair with 3 people in their county in Iowa or Indiana, and the candidate who is working 24/7 trying not to go crazy didn't call me, so therefore I'm not supporting them. They have a dog crap campaign. That must be true in the Democratic Party, too. The similarities between the LP and the DNC are crazy to me. I've been paying attention to the DNC more this year, and there's always some crazy... something happens on stage that's embarrassing, or there's a personality fight, and I don't know. There's just a lot of similarities, but that ego that people have, that they ought to be contacted by leadership and personally ask for their votes. No, you're a county chair. Shut up and do something. But that was very effective, right? Look, the stakes are high. I'm going to appeal to your moral foundation of what you know is decent and right. And don't get discouraged. Get active. Very effective. I think even if you are on the opposite side of this, you go, oh crap, they're going to get motivated. I better get to work too. So I think I'm listening to it going, oh man, Democrats are coming. Better get our stuff organized, because that was really effective, really strong.
No time for that kind of foolishness. You know what you need to do.
There's something so freeing about being a former party official and then getting to talk down to your old party about all the things that they did that drove you crazy, but you couldn't talk about it when you were in charge.
Consider this to be your official ask Michelle Obama is asking, I'm telling y'all, to do something. Because you all, this election is going to be close. In some states, just a handful, listen to me, a handful of votes in every precinct could decide the winner.
That, by the way, is totally true. I was listening to the daily New York Times podcast, and they were on the ground in Wisconsin, I believe. And they were talking to a Democratic organizer, and he said, I just need 50 new votes per precinct, I think it was. And he said the job is easy because she has activated women voters, whereas Joe Biden didn't. This race is going to come down to 50,000 people in 3 states. Probably not North Carolina, Arizona, Nevada, Georgia. It'll probably be Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, like with Hillary and Trump. So, I mean, you just heard her say, don't wait for somebody to call and ask you. Voters do the same thing. Most people don't know who's actually running for office, especially in lower races. And they literally wait for somebody to contact them before they actually get up and go. It's crazy to me because I've always, as soon as I could register to vote, I did. I was so politically active and still have always loved politics. I'm a news junkie, right? So it's just, I actually didn't vote in the primary this year. I forgot it was election day and I just didn't go. And I'm a libertarian, so I don't care. So I don't think I vote in primaries very often. I did for my buddy Abdul. But to forget that it's election day is so freeing, but so many people don't even know it's election day. It's amazing to me. I talked to somebody last week who said, yeah, I just found out that Kamala got in the race this week. Like, you just went 4 whole weeks without knowing that Joe Biden quit. They said, yes, it blows my mind.
To vote in numbers that erase any doubt. We need to overwhelm.
Key point. We need Democrats to vote in these precincts to erase any doubt. Because as Rachel Maddow pointed to in New York Times yesterday, I believe, 2 days ago, the plan is that they're going to try the fake elector thing. So create enough doubt in a place like Wisconsin in certain precincts that you send your electors to Washington, D.C., try to delay the proceedings, and this is what they were doing on January 6th, try to delay the proceedings past January 6th, because the Constitution says you must do it on that day, and get it into the Republican-controlled Congress, where then Trump gets selected. That was the plan. That's still the plan. And if Donald Trump or Kamala Harris doesn't win this election big, that's what we're looking at.
Any effort to suppress us. Our fate is in our hands. In 77 days, we have the power to turn our country away from the fear, division, and smallness of the past. We have the power to marry our hope with our action. We have the power to pay forward the love, sweat, and sacrifice of our mothers and fathers and all those who came before us. We did it before, y'all, and we sure can do it again. Let us work like our lives depend on it. And let us keep moving our country forward and go higher. Yes, always higher than we've ever gone before as we elect the next president and vice president of the United States, Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. Thank you all. God bless.
All right, so hate the Flight 93, we're all going to die if we don't elect Kamala rhetoric there. But effective speech, very well received, memorable lines, very well written. Yeah, I know. I think it's going to be something that is remembered for a long time, like Obama's speech. I'm going to talk about that tomorrow. And continuing, what I've been talking about is like, what does it mean to be an American? What is patriotism according to these two parties? And help us ask some questions about what we believe. So thank you for listening here. We really do appreciate you listening. And let me see if I can find, I'm still not used to it. There we go. All right. Thanks for joining us here on the Chris Spangle Show. Thanks for being a patron. Greatly appreciate all of your support. The reviews are in. We've lost one patron since I started doing this. But several of you have commented, and I do appreciate that. Hey, I'll keep doing this if you all keep commenting and upping your subscriptions and we gain patrons. And apparently, if I keep doing this, it's going to make some of you quit. No-win situation, I guess. All right, we'll see you again tomorrow. Take care.